right now, and I'm going to try to trim it up and make it quick. Actually, we've talked about a lot of the components. We've talked about a lot of the components already throughout the night. So what we're going to do is give you a little generic presentation that I've actually given to the BOCC. They do support the securing of development plans during the land use amendment component. So you have support at that level. Now, I've also talked to several of the developers, as you heard tonight, and it's not unreasonable, and it occurs in a lot of different jurisdictions. So development plans, who here has dealt with them before? Okay, it's a spruced up plat, essentially, that gives you defined areas of greenery, grading. What are you going to do with stormwater? Not to the level that you're going to deal with the plat. Some areas do. Some areas will require a development plan and qualify that as a preliminary plat. So you can speed up that timeline should you choose to do it, but it just intensifies the requirements that have to be supplied in the development plan. So I think the initial element here, we've got about 10 criteria. Well, might be a little more than 10. Flip to the next. But generically, these would be applicable to 2.5 acre lots and less. Okay, we don't see a defined benefit for a large acreage subdivision having to do a development plan. But when you have higher densities, it makes sense to address those items around those particular neighborhoods. So some of these, let me just run through the proposed requirements. 3 paper copies. Can you guys all see that in front of you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Some really smart stuff.
Yeah, 3 paper copies because I'm old and I still like paper, and the rest can be digital. North arrow scale, regard subject property only, existing topography and contours at 5-foot intervals, delineating any land areas within the 100-year floodplain, a lot of the things that you're going to see in a preliminary plat, just not as defined. Proper location of buildings, other structures that may exist on the site, sufficient dimensions to indicate relationship between buildings, property lines, parking areas, and other elements of the plan. I won't read each and every one of these to you. These are pretty generic requirements. Flip to the next one. And again, I'll give you a few minutes to go through this, and we can certainly email the presentation to you.
Preliminaries.
But I don't appreciate a presentation being read to me word for word. And again, these are generic requirements, but these would be base requirements on any development plan moving forward if it were to become policy. Click to the next one.
So let me ask you, are these delaying builders a month, 2 months, 3 months from getting there?
Typically, builders are going to have their generic layouts long before
They come to you?
They come to you for rezoning. They're going to know how many lots they're going to have. They're going to generically know what they're going to have in cost per lot. Otherwise, they're not purchasing the property. Typically, it's a contingent purchase depending on its ability to make it through the development process. That's typically how it's done. So they crunch those numbers up front. So what I'm asking for is, okay, give me the information that you have. We're not holding you to dimensions on lots, but we do want a conceptual plan that reasonably identifies what you anticipate doing in this particular area.
I think you're right. I think most of them do have some type of a
They do.
conceptual idea of what they're doing.
They have to. They have to see if the numbers work,
Yep.
to buy the parcel and to develop the parcel. So again, this would only be in the 2.5 acre and less because that's really only a conversation for higher density development. So what you see before you are some examples. Can you go back one? What you see is a landscape architect's rendering of a development plan. This is typically what you're going to see in larger jurisdictions on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, this is a PUD style development plan. It kind of gives you densities, parking areas, greenscape, buffering, all of access points, all of those components. Go ahead and click to the next one. You can see some different styles here. What you see on the very top is a 1 acre subdivision. What you see to the right also is 1 acre. So you can see the definition that you can get from a development plan. What you see on the bottom left is actually an aerial with a development plan overlaid for the second phase of a subdivision. So if you had what you had tonight, you had neighbors coming in, what are you going to do? Well, this is what we're going to do. Here's the aerial. Here is the anticipated lot count, the anticipated road locations, and anticipated, in this case, you've got detention on site, which, now, is it going to address each and every lot? The grading plan for no, it's not going to address all of those. It's going to generally address those items. Where's the stormwater going to go? Well, it's going to go in this detention facility. But what I can't tell you is what the pool elevation is going to be. That's an engineering component and occurs through the platting process. So that's the difference between a development plan and a platting document, along with the associative studies that accompany that. So this is really what we wanted to show you, give you the generic requirements there to clearly define what we're going to expect out of everybody once this becomes policy. We want to make sure we have a congruence of opinion on what those items should be, understanding that if we get too far down in the weeds with requirements, we're essentially asking them to plat at a land use, at the initial stage, which isn't reasonable on anything of major density, in my view. So again, this is a very generic overview. Do you support, and it sounds like you did earlier tonight, do you support development plans with the criteria that I've submitted to you today?
Absolutely.
And can we move forward with policy formation to make this a formal requirement? As it stands today, in my view, and if Joe's still here behind me, he can attest to this. I believe you, as a planning commission, have the ability to ask for a concept plan now. What you don't have is specific criteria to include in that plan. This will address that.
Exactly. So when we say, where's the water going, we know.
You're going to know in general terms where the water's going to go, but you're not going to know how much water's going to go there. In your mind, you're going to know that we are shooting for a zero net increase, which means what? We want no difference between a pre and post-developed condition. Now, that may mean that you have to detain on site. Maybe you can reduce it by other factors. There's a lot of ways to accomplish that.
With that zero net goal, does that take into account
That's a fact.
like the exact areas of where that runoff is occurring? Meaning,
within the confines or the boundaries of the subdivision, you will have a grading plan and a drainage plan that's submitted as part of the platting process.
Right.
So you're going to know approximately.
That's the platting process, though.
What's that?
That's the platting process.
Right, but understand the difference between what we're talking about
Right.
and the platting and engineering process. It's starkly different things. So we're going to know, in general terms, we're going to have detention in the subdivision. How is it all going to get there? Well, that's an engineering component and part of the platting process. So you, as commissioners, are going to have to understand that, yeah, there's some engineering here that we're not reviewing tonight, but we do know that we have on-site detention here. We don't know what the pool level is going to be. We don't know what the CFS is going to be, but we do know that there's a plan for it. The defined, detailed plan? No. In general terms, this is our layout. This is what we're committing to. This is the amount of lots that we have to make the subdivision work from a development standpoint. Does each one of these intersections exactly match 1,200 feet? Maybe not. But during the platting process, the subdivision regulations, the engineering components, and those studies come into play as you're reviewing them. So when you're reviewing a development plan, and especially in front of a hostile crowd, 9 times out of 10, that's going to be the case. You have to be okay with saying, these are the criteria that we're looking for, and they either are or they are not met. And then you make your deliberations and the subjective components of your review. But that's our intent. In a nutshell, we want to include general criteria to get to a defined development plan with you understanding that finite engineering is not part of that development plan. You need to understand that up front. And don't weigh the development plan as you would a final plat. That plat needs to be in general conformance with that development plan. You can't come in with 20 lots and then come in with a preliminary plat that has 70. So it has to be in general conformance with the development plan so that we can get a consistent review and a consistent reaction from land use amendment to final plat. That is the goal. And with that, I'd take any questions.
How are we going to get, when subdivision, and we'll do it tonight, close to the city of Basehor? They will be in the city of Basehor eventually. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
Just when it's going to be in, if the city of Basehor doesn't act, there might be another city that starts and takes them, just like we have in Johnson County. One goes to another one. So it's going to be in the city. Why can't we make requirements that a subdivision that's within a mile or up to 3 miles, and that might be a little far, meet the city regulations for a subdivision, curb, gutter?
That's actually a statutory
sidewalks.
requirement, but we can't mandate that the city make them adhere to that particular rule. So we as a county haven't adopted their standards. We
Yeah.
can only say that within 660 feet, you are subject to that adjoining city's design criteria. If the city goes, we're not interested, then we can only fall back to our adopted guidelines.
Well, maybe we need to change our guidelines.
Well, I've been part of a process like that. I have been part of a process of extraterritorial zoning in a 3 mile urban growth area. It's very, very hard to get a joint commission to work together, even harder to get a governing body to put together a set of criteria for that particular area and then enforce it. It's almost impossible to do.
Yeah.
So if that is the concern, I think the best way to address that is to do it through the comprehensive plan. Again, you've got a statutory requirement within 660 feet.
Yeah.
Keeping in mind that we can't make each city take responsibility for developments.
And I know, and they haven't.
Well,
Yeah, exactly, they haven't.
But there's no way to secure that. Even if you changed your regulations and made them far more stringent, you're not going to accomplish your end goal. You know, at best, you may kill development in the immediate area around each one of the cities, which may be your goal. I don't know that that's a good choice. And again, it's almost impossible to enforce. If you do manage to get them to agree to it, how are you going to enforce those regulations?
Well,
Can't we just ask them to put the sidewalks and streetlights in, though?
Those
I
are,
mean,
those are different subdivision regulations that can be discussed, but I don't think there's support for that right now. Now, from a county level, 1 acre zoning sounds like apartments. It's not. You know, again, in a city where you have, you know, your light requirements, your sidewalk requirements, all of the curb, gutter, storm structure, 1 acre is an extremely large lot. Okay, it's much, much higher density. So the higher the density, the easier it is to pay for those public improvements. The less lots you have, the less room you have for anyone to make those numbers work. So the more structure you have, the more requirements you have, the less likely you are to have development in those particular areas. So I don't know that more stringent subdivision regulations are the answer. Maybe a more cooperative atmosphere with each one of the towns, which I can shoulder that and try to accomplish that.
Yeah.
But that may change with personnel. That may change with governing bodies. There's no way for me to guarantee you that I can make each one of these cities accept responsibility within that 660
I know.
foot. It's
and
just not
It's
feasible.
been a battle since, I mean, I've been on here a long time, and it's been a battle since I've been on here. And everything indicates that you want your growth around the cities and leave your rural areas rural. And we can't get that done. And every time we do a 2.5 acre lot subdivision, it's still, even 2.5 is eliminating the chance for the city to grow, to get sewers out there. Those two we had today are really killers for
Well,
getting sewers out there.
There's a way to accomplish that, and it's not necessarily run the sewers. When you're running sanitary sewer or any utility, a big portion of the cost of that particular improvement is land allocation. Buying up
Yep.
all of those existing
Yep.
easements and construction,
Yep.
construction easements, et cetera, et cetera. When we go through the planning process on the second subdivision that we're doing, the higher density subdivision, I've asked the developer to include those sanitary sewer easements as part of the planning process. And we're going to get with Baser and try to outline where those need to be located and require the developer to put those in now. So when Baser comes in and they put their interceptor in, they won't have to buy up property to stick a collection system in. There won't be pools on top of it, buildings and structures over the top of a logical extension where you've already got that platted easement. So that's one way to address those. Trying to allocate those easements up front when they're within that 660-foot ring, and maybe we don't have buy-in from that particular community. We can make some reasonable assessments on where they need to locate those particular drainage easements. And I think we can get buy-in mostly from the developers, because logically they know they're going to be annexed in a short period of time as soon as sanitary sewer is available.
But let me ask you, aren't the communities, Tongi, Baser, Lansing, Leavenworth, part of Leavenworth County and others, aren't they communicating with our planning and zoning when they're talking about expanding those sewage lines and land purchases that they're having to do? I mean, Lansing right now, we're paying a lot of money
Oh, I know.
for those folks along Highway 7
Oh, I know.
as we're trying to put better, bigger sewage lines through.
Right.
We're having to buy that land from them.
Sure. Yeah, and you know just how expensive that is.
Yeah.
If you could have got that allocated through development and didn't have to
Right.
buy up that property,
Right.
you can pour that money into more improvement. In other words, instead of doing a mile, you're doing 2.
Yeah.
If you can expel that particular component of the capital improvement process. So,
Now, different topic, different time, but I don't know if each one of them, but I know Lansing received X amount of dollars during the COVID for the whatever it's called, towards sewage projects or water projects. And so that's how we're able to do it. We still have that. It's use it or lose it. You're coming up on your suspense of use it. But someone like Baser, I'm sure they got something.
well, actually, I sit
government
on
and-
several committees that do allocate funds through Mark, and what I would say is that those funds have to be programmed. That happens years in advance.
Yeah.
So, when those funds become available, you then have to have the matching component. So there's always it's normally an 80-20, sometimes it's a 90-10. But again, when you're dealing with funding and you're dealing with programming, that takes years. Now, does Baser and Tongi come to us and say, eventually we're going to have, they'll have conceptual plans of where they might lay an interceptor, but logically, people want gravity-fed sewers. They don't want lift stations if they can get away from it. So you can go to the watershed, look at the low line, and figure that's approximately where that interceptor is going to be located, and then you have to program collection systems off that particular point. So they don't really get with us on their potential improvements outside of their jurisdictional lines. We know that they have improvement plans in their comp plan, but it certainly isn't defined enough where you could plan around it and say this is exactly what's going to happen. You may have many towns that have a multitude of studies and never fund a single one. So I've seen it many, many times in a career.
Got it.
So with that, are there any, again, trying to trim up the night and let you guys go home before the sun comes up in the morning. Do you have any additional questions as it relates to development plans and the criteria? I'm not going to go through each one tonight. I want you to take a look at them. If you have questions or you think something needs to be added, please email me, and we can adjust that list. But they're pretty generic, except Joe, he can't.
I saw Joe's hand. Tell Joe to sit down.
Can you see him remind you? These plat examples are really good. I mean, that's.
I like that, and I like, taking into account to the developer, hey, put this stuff in play and kind of make it their responsibility to put the easements in and think of,
Right, and I think we take a proactive approach,
Yeah.
A planning approach to platting. I think we can accomplish quite a bit. Can I guarantee you 100% success? No, I can't. But I can give you all the tools that are humanly possible to have a better process at the end of the day.
Well, I don't know how all the rest of the cities are, but I can tell you that in this gentleman's case, he's driving the train right now, because he can quickly say, well, I'm not going to build for you. Hey, good luck. And the other builder's like, well, I can't do that. I don't have the crews anymore. I'm not okay. So he's pretty much driving the train, because sitting on city council for Lansing, I can tell you all that you almost have to give away everything in order to have a builder come and build a neighborhood for you.
Well, the wonderful
You just pretty much give them it all. Give them the free water. Give them the free sewage. Hell, just give them the free land. Why? Because we need the neighborhood so bad. We need taxpayers, and we need schools to be filled because our school numbers are getting low. I mean, it just depends on which city you're going to and who's been building and who's not. In Lansing, we haven't built a new home in Lansing in 4 years. Not one new home.
Well, I would say this, that regardless of the developer, they're there to make money. They're only showing up to places where a market exists for their particular project.
Sure.
So if you're having a lot of development actions, you're having a lot of consternation about land use, well, that's a good problem to have. There's a lot of worse problems to have. Like Lansing, we haven't had any definable development in a number of years. Now, I did 27 years at Lansing. I can tell you this, we do 104 houses. On a hot year, on a low year, somewhere around 70. Well, that's a pretty good number for a town of 10,000 at the time,
Right.
10,000 people to what it is today. That's a great example of market, okay? Nobody is here as a community service. They are here to make money. When the market is here, you need to figure out why and make sure that you address that through all of your planning
Well,
and your policy.
the fact that industry and infrastructure is pouring in Tongi and pouring in, around the Baser area, and that's the reason why they're swarming in like damn bees on honey, man. They're
I don't know
swarming.
that I agree with that.
Really?
Just because I think people are swarming here because of the unique nature of its proximity to those things, but those were already here. But
Oh, I'm
also
talking
the
about the
rural
new stuff.
nature
I'm talking
and all
about the new
that.
stuff.
Because now, in terms of prices, I'm sorry, it takes a pretty high-paying job to buy your $600,000 house, and who knows what the lot's going to be, and then and pay the
Well,
taxes, and I mean,
I think you hit it on the head. The reality is that you can get a lot more house and a lot more ground in Leavenworth County for the same money. $600,000 isn't going to get you a front-to-back split in Northeast Johnson County on a 6,000 square foot lot. That's the reality. Try to build in the UG. Try to build in Johnson County. It's not remotely the
Overland
same.
Park, all that shit.
Leavenworth County.
Go to Paola, and they got the same problem.
Leavenworth County has a definable market that's easy to see. And again, I would say, take care of that market. Take care of that. And be logical about your development. Be logical about your policies and how you address those things. And be consistent. Consistency is the key to maintaining market.
So let me ask you. This is more towards Dr. Bailey. Is Baser configured leadership-wise based on the amount of growth they know that's coming? I mean, are they configured to help plan and set this into place?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
No.
Because I know DeSoto
This is happening too
DeSoto's
fast.
had it for a while, man.
Yeah.
DeSoto is stacked. They are ready. They are.
Well,
I don't think
here's
Baser is.
here's the thing.
I mean, Baser hadn't even prepared a fire department yet.
Things happen quickly, and it does occur. Actually, it happened in Lansing as well before Fire District 1 was there. A lot of things happen, and they do happen quickly. You have to adapt, and you have to address the issues in front of you.
Yeah.
It's not a question of if you're going to grow. You are absolutely going to grow. But what do you want to do to define that growth? That's really the question, And again, if you've got a definable market, consistency is the key. Too much regulation is not a good thing. Not enough is not a good thing. You need to be consistent and concise with all of your policy and then enforce it that way, regardless of who's in the room, regardless of anything else. What is the fair and reasonable and good thing to do for the county as a whole or a specific section, depending on the impacts of that particular development. And that's all the preaching I have for one single night.
Answer your question, several years ago, the mayor of Baser came to my office, sat down across from my desk, and said, "We are ready to put sewers all the way to Fairmont Road. We want to put it in and we can develop it." But nothing ever happened. I mean, they actually have, but only up their estates or whatever it is.
Oh, yeah.
Funding comes and goes at the federal level, and so you can think, you can anticipate what funding is going to be for a specific project. You can program that project, but things may happen, and you may not be able to either get the participating cost or that funding may be allocated to something else at the federal level. And those, you can't guarantee those things. So you can make all the plans you want, But at the end of the day, if you can't execute the plan, it does you absolutely no good. So again, a reasonable amount of regulation and a consistent application of that regulation in my 34 years is the best formula for success over a
tell you
long
what.
period of time.
We're paying for all the sewer for them. I mean, we're putting the sewer in the lane. I mean, we're putting it everywhere. We want a neighborhood to come in, so that way this gentleman can come in and go, I don't have to pay anything. No, we just need to build a neighborhood.
The biggest
So we've
problem-
already put the sewer in. We've already put this in. Can you just build a neighborhood for us? You know,
The biggest
I'll think
prob-
about it. I'm going to DeSoto. I'm going to Basehor.
Right.
God, man.
What's
Board of
turnkey?
Platte
But-
County.
You know, a lot of that, well, for Lansing, for example, one of the biggest problems with their sanitary sewer system was that the interceptors were never sized for full development.
Right.
So you may have the line, but you may not have the capacity. Just simply having them isn't enough. Your plant has got to be able to handle the flows. Your collection system's got to be able to handle the flows. I mean, those are all questions that really, at the end of the day, are driven by density. What density do you want to see? That makes your future land use plan the critical component in the decision-making process for all of the things that follow it.
Future land use plan.
Well, and part of the problem with, both Lansing and Leavenworth, we haven't had real leadership that's looking for the future. We're living for the now, and that's good enough for them. I mean,
Well, that is exactly. you're
that's
right.
exactly what it was. I mean, Basehor did the same thing. They're down there, they're like, hey, we're good with what we got, and everything's okay.
Well-
I mean, they didn't think about building anything out for development.
And what I would say is this, there's lots of ways to accomplish a goal, okay? The standard way to accomplish the goal is run an interceptor back to a treatment plant located in the city. There are other ways to skin that cat that do not end up in a septic tank. So just stay with me. And we're going to explore some of those in the next year, and there may be federal dollars to accomplish it. So I'm not prepared to say anything about it tonight, but I am prepared to say this: there are a lot of ways to accomplish the goal, and we're gonna see what we can do to explore those options.
So we're getting close to end of November now. I mean, for
Yeah.
practical purposes, I know it's just the beginning, but the way things are running right now, it's going to be Thanksgiving before you know it. We talked about a transportation plan. There was a gentleman that kept coming here over and over and over about a transportation plan. What's the status of the transportation plan, John? Do you know?
You know,
Nothing?
I will I heard a few things in the past week, but before I open my big mouth, I want to make sure that it is the latest and greatest information. So I will get back to you with an answer by the next meeting.
Can we, I don't want to drive work sessions and so forth, but the fact that a lot of this growth is also geared towards the future land use map, it's geared towards the transportation plan, it's all part of it.
Yep.
Nothing is ever talked about in this transportation plan, and then like Dr. Bailey, we're going to have this thing in front of us, and we're going to all be like, okay, we're ready to vote it. It's here. You remember that? You remember that last January?
Yeah.
And here we go. And the transportation plan was part of it, and there was no brief, there was no discussion, and we're still right where we were.
Well, I agree, and I would say not from the previous discussion, but I would agree in this part that the comprehensive plan is made of multiple aspects, and the future land use plan is only one component of it.
Right.
So when we weigh the comprehensive plan, we're going to weigh all components on that, and we're going to give you a narrative a short narrative in our staff report that weighs that comp plan. It's compliant for this, and this. You may or may not agree with that assessment, but we're going to give you our professional assessment that we believe it does for this reason. And that's all we can do. At the end of the day, you take that information and make a determination on
Thank you.
it. With that, I have nothing else.
Hey, I just want to say before we break away tonight, I really appreciate y'all's professionalism. I really do. It makes it good. What we did tonight by hearing them and listening to them and speaking to them means a lot.
It means a lot to them people.
And,
I mean,
and the goodness of us being professionals is we may not agree with everything that we vote. We have yeses, we have nos, but when we get up from here, we're still like best friends and professionals. And I can't thank you enough for being like that. I really can't, because this is a great organization. We don't have any drama. That's pretty much what I'm getting at. There's no drama here.
Well,
and I can't thank you. I can't thank
so
y'all
you
enough.
want all of us
I
to
can't
run
thank
for
y'all enough
Lansing
for that.
City Council